Welcome to Module 9, Regulatory Submissions. In this module, you will learn about 510Ks, EUAs, technical files, and establishment registrations. Note that there will be a quiz at the end of this module. You must score at least an 80% to pass, and the quiz can be retaken as many times as needed. Let's start with the 510K. A 510K is a pre-market submission made to the FDA to demonstrate that a device is substantially equivalent to one or more legally marketed devices, commonly known as predicates. Legally marketed means that the predicate cannot be one that is in violation of the FD&C Act, and substantial equivalence means that the new device is as safe and effective as the predicate. A device is considered substantially equivalent if it has the same intended use as the predicate and has the same technological characteristics, or if it has the same intended use, different characteristics, but those differences do not raise any questions of safety and effectiveness, and if the information submitted to the FDA demonstrates that the device is safe and effective. The 510K contains information that is required per Part 807.87, and Part 807.92 details the contents that are required in these submissions. A claim of substantial equivalence does not mean that the new and predicate devices need to be identical. The FDA first establishes that the new and predicate devices have the same intended use and that any differences do not raise safety concerns, and then the FDA will then determine if the device is as safe and effective as the predicate by reviewing the scientific methods used to evaluate the characteristics and performance data, such as clinical and non-clinical bench performance data. This can include engineering performance testing, sterility, electromagnetic compatibility, software validation, biocompatibility evaluation, among other data. Once the device is determined to be substantially equivalent, it can then be marketed in the U.S. Until the submitter receives an order declaring the device is substantially equivalent, the device cannot be marketed. The substantial equivalence determination usually takes about 90 days and is made based on the information that is submitted. The manufacturer must then be prepared for an FDA quality system inspection at any time after clearance. If the FDA determines that a device is not substantially equivalent, the applicant may resubmit another 510K with new data, request a Class 1 or Class 2 designation through a de novo classification process, file a reclassification petition, or submit a pre-market approval application, or PMA. We will discuss de novo classification and PMA later in this module. The following 4 categories of parties must submit a 510K to the FDA. First, we have domestic finished device manufacturers introducing a device to the U.S. market. If contract manufacturers are utilized, the contract manufacturers are not required to submit a 510K. A contract manufacturer is a firm that manufactures a device under contract according to someone else's specifications. Next, we have specification developers introducing a device to the U.S. market. A specification developer develops the specifications for a finished device but has the device manufactured under contract by another firm or entity, such as a contract manufacturer. The specification developer submits the 510K and not the contract manufacturer. Next, we have repackers or relabelers who make labeling changes or whose operations significantly affect the device. Significant labeling changes may include modification of manuals, such as adding a new intended use, deleting or adding additional warnings, contraindications, or operations such as sterilization that could alter the condition of the device. Most repackers and relabelers, however, are not required to submit a 510K. And lastly, we have foreign manufacturers or U.S. representatives of foreign manufacturers introducing a device to the U.S. market. There are 3 primary times when a 510K is required. First is when introducing a device into commercial distribution for the first time, unless otherwise exempt. So anyone who sells a device in the U.S. is required to make a 510K submission at least 90 days prior to offering the device for sale. Second is when there is a change or modification to a legally marketed device and that change could significantly affect its safety or effectiveness. The burden is on the 510K holder to decide whether or not a modification could significantly affect the safety or effectiveness, and any modifications made should be made in accordance with 21 CFR Part 820 and recorded in the device master record and the change control records. It is recommended that a justification for submitting or not submitting a new 510K be recorded in the change control records. And lastly, a new 510K submission is required for changes or modifications to an existing device where the modifications could significantly affect the safety or effectiveness, or if the marketed device is intended to be used in a new or different way. There are three types of 510Ks that can be submitted to the FDA: traditional, special, and abbreviated. The traditional 510K can be used under any circumstance to seek authorization of a new device. The special 510K is intended for existing devices that have already been authorized for commercial distribution. An abbreviated 510K relies on the use of FDA guidance documents, demonstration of compliance with special controls, and/or voluntary consensus standards. In the abbreviated 510K submission, manufacturers provide summary reports based on the use of guidance documents or special controls or declarations of conformity to standards to help facilitate the FDA's review of the submission. If the FDA determines that an abbreviated 510K is not appropriate for the review, the FDA will notify the submitter and convert the 510K into a traditional 510K, and in most cases that will require additional information. The De Novo request provides a marketing pathway to classify novel medical devices for which general and special controls provide the assurance that they are safe and effective, but for which there is no legally marketed predicate device. Devices that are classified into Class 1 or Class 2 through a De Novo request may be marketed and used as predicates for future pre-market notification submissions. The De Novo classification process is a risk-based process, and there are two options to submit a De Novo request to the FDA. Option 1 is after receiving a not substantially equivalent determination from the FDA, or option 2 is when the requester themselves determine that there is no legally marketed device upon which to claim equivalence. Prior to submitting a De Novo request to the FDA, organizations should consider submitting a pre-submission to obtain feedback from the appropriate pre-market review division. A De Novo request should include all the content elements necessary for acceptance of the De Novo request, listed in Appendix A of the Acceptance Review for De Novo Classification Request Guidance document. The pre-market approval process, or PMA process, is the FDA process of scientific and regulatory review to evaluate the safety and effectiveness of Class 3 medical devices. Class 3 devices are those that support or sustain human life, are of substantial importance in preventing impairment of human health, and or which present a potential unreasonable risk of illness or injury. Due to the level of risk associated with Class 3 devices, the FDA has determined that general and special controls alone are insufficient to assure the safety and effectiveness of Class 3 devices. The PMA is the most stringent type of device marketing application required by the FDA. The applicant must receive FDA approval of its PMA application prior to marketing the device. PMA approval is based on a determination by the FDA that the PMA contains sufficient valid scientific evidence to ensure the device's safety and effectiveness for its intended use or uses. If a PMA application lacks valid clinical information and scientific analysis, it could impact the FDA's review and approval. Scientific writing is key to the approval of the PMA application. The PMA applicant is usually the person who owns the rights of the device or otherwise has authorized access to the data and other information submitted in order to support FDA approval. Let's now discuss emergency use authorizations. Emergency use authorization, or EUA, allows the FDA to expedite the availability of medical products or countermeasures to help strengthen the nation's public health protections against chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear threats. The FDA established the EUA program in 2014 in response to threats of bioterrorist attacks, including that of anthrax. Later, it was used for swine flu, Ebola, COVID, and other major public health threats. EUAs in these instances included tests, vaccines, antiviral treatments, and personal protective equipment. An EUA can only be granted when no adequate approved available alternative exists and when the known and potential benefits outweigh the potential risks. An EUA only lasts as long as the public health emergency for which it is declared. The EUA is different than full approval because in some emergency situations, we cannot wait for all the evidence needed for full FDA approval. An EUA can be revised or revoked by the FDA at any point as the agency evaluates the most current needs and available data. To help prepare for potential and current emergencies, the FDA works with medical countermeasure developers to prepare pre-EUA packages when appropriate. Pre-EUA packages contain data and information about the safety, quality, and efficacy of a product, its intended use for the future or current EUA, and information about the emergency or potential emergency situation. The pre-EUA process allows the FDA scientific and technical subject matter experts to begin the review of information to assist in the development of conditions of authorization, fact sheets, and other documentation that would be needed for an EUA in advance of an emergency, and also helps to facilitate the complete EUA requests during a current emergency declaration. A pre-EUA can only transition into an EUA if there is a current applicable emergency declaration. Let's now discuss technical files. A technical file is essentially a European version of the 510(k). The technical file, or TF, demonstrates how the product conforms to applicable European Union medical device regulations, also known as EU MDR. European regulations require manufacturers to create and maintain a technical file or files as a prerequisite to submitting a Declaration of Conformity, or DOC, that would allow products to be CE marked. A CE mark is what allows products to be sold in the European Union member states. CE marking indicates that a product has been assessed by the manufacturer and deemed to meet EU safety, health, and environmental protection requirements. Organizations need to be through verification and design validation to put together a technical file, as there is a greater need for clinical data for products to be marketed in the EU. The technical documentation included in the TF provides evidence that a medical device meets the general safety and performance requirements. This documentation must be available for the appropriate authorities to review upon request. Usually, the manufacturer or their authorized representative must keep the technical file for at least 10 years from the last date of manufacture of the product. The technical file should include the following elements that are identified in EU MDR Annex 2, 3, and 4. First, it should include a general device description and specifications. This includes information related to the intended use and target patient population of the device, UDI/DI information, description of accessories and variants, and any information related to the principles of operation and key functional elements. Next, the technical file should include a complete set of labels, both for the device and its packaging, along with its instructions for use. The technical file should also include detailed design and manufacturing information that includes manufacturing processes and their validation, final testing data, and the identification of all sites, suppliers, and/or subcontractors. The technical file should also include General Safety and Performance Requirements, or GSPR. This information demonstrates the conformity to the GSPRs listed in Annex 1 and includes justification of information that meets those requirements, as well as any applicable harmonized standards. The technical file should also include documented risk management and risk-benefit analysis information. It should also include product verification and validation and post-market surveillance information. And this includes preclinical and clinical data such as study protocols, test results, a clinical evaluation plan and report, a post-market clinical follow-up, or PMCF, and/or justification for no PMCF. The technical file should also include a post-market surveillance plan and a periodic safety update report, or post-market surveillance report, depending on the classification of the device, as well as a declaration of conformity. Lastly, let's discuss establishment registration. With establishment registration, owners or operators of establishments that are involved in the production and distribution of medical devices intended for the use in the U.S. are required to register annually with the FDA. This process is known as establishment registration and is referenced in 21 CFR Part 807. Device establishments are required to also pay an annual fee. Generally, establishments that are required to register with the FDA are also required to list the devices that are made there and the activities that are performed on those devices. If a device requires a pre-market submission before being marketed in the U.S., then the owner or operator should also provide the FDA pre-market submission number, whether it's the 510K, De Novo, PMA, PDP, HDE, etc. All registration and listing information must be submitted electronically unless a waiver has been granted. We have now reached the end of this module. Be sure to review all applicable procedure informed templates that Rook has related to the requirements listed in this module. Before moving to the next module, be sure to take the Module 9 quiz. You must score at least an 80% to pass, and the quiz can be retaken as many times as needed.